going to the caver of the Tzaddik. We had a shir last year on Balak about Tircha de Tzibura. Last year we had a shir on Chukas about if David HaMelech or Ezra could tamper with the Chumash, etc. Today we have something new we haven't yet touched upon, and that is Tza'ar b'alei Chaim. The pain that humans are enabled to inflict upon animals. When is it justified? When is it allowed? When is it frowned upon? Can we use animals for experiments? Can a person go hunting and harass animals for fun, for pleasure? It's constructive, right? Pleasure is constructive, puts people in a good mood. And according to some Rishonim, the discussion of this, you can take one, is actually from this parsha, from Parshas Balak. We begin with number one as a comment from the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. It's in the third chelik, in the 17th perek. Says the Rambam, Va'amnam. Amram, this that the rabbis say, Tza'ar b'alei Chaim Deraisa, inflicting pain upon an animal is biblical. It's a biblical issue. Now I will tell you that in Gemara, it's primarily discussed in Masechta Bab Metzia, Daf Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimel. The Gemara there is referring to the mitzvahs of Te'ina and Perika. If you see somebody's animal which is struggling under a load. So there are two mitzvahs. There's one mitzvah of Te'ina, if the load is falling off, to help reload the animal. There's another mitzvah of Perika, that if the load needs to be unloaded, and nebech, the animal's pashat falling underneath the load, go help it out, take off the load. And there's two different mitzvahs. One is Te'ina, loading, one is Perika, unloading. But that's where the Gemara gets into a discussion if Tza'ar b'alei Chaim, if inflicting pain upon an animal is a biblical issue or only a rabbinic issue. And the Gemara there says it's a debate between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili maintains that if somebody's animal was loaded with a load that was too much, he learns from a pasuk, roivetz tachas masoy, only if the animal is crouching under its regular load. If the load was too much, the owner was negligent and loaded too much upon the animal, then the bystander, the onlooker, does not have to help. There's no mitzvah. And the Chachamim disagree. And the Gemara says the machlokes probably is, the Chachamim say, even if it's overloaded, you may not have the specific mitzvah of helping the guy, of prick, of unloading, because the guy was negligent, but there's another factor to take into account. Tza'ar b'alei Chaim. You may have to go help the person just because the animal is suffering. And that's where the Gemara makes this debate, that according to the Chachamim, Tza'ar b'alei Chaim is a biblical issue. According to Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, it's rabbinic. Who do we paskin like? Well, the Rambam here in the Moreh Nevuchim says clearly, Tza'ar b'alei Chaim is Deraisa. In the Rambam's Sefer Hayad, there is a great discussion of what the Rambam holds. The Minchas Chinuch, on the mitzvah of Perika, of unloading in Parshas Mishpatim, he has many paragraphs discussing what is the true position of the Rambam, and for quite a while he wants to posit the idea that the Rambam holds it's only rabbinic, but in the end he makes a 180 and he says, Taka, he thinks the Rambam agrees it's biblical. What's interesting is he doesn't quote the Moreh Nevuchim. The Minchas Chinuch is a Lamdisha Sefer. He's not quoting Moreh Nevuchim, but here in the Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam says black and white that Tza'ar b'alei Chaim is Deraisa. But the Rambam wants to know, how do we know it's Deraisa? He's passing like Chacham, it's biblical. Really? Really? Where in the Chumash do you see? Where in the Chumash do you see? So he says, May Amrates from this week's Parasha Balak, Al Mahi Kisa Sasencha. The Malach challenges and rebukes Bilam, why did you hit your donkey? That's written in the Chumash. That means that the Torah is clearly saying it's unwarranted, it's not appropriate, it's forbidden to harass one's animal, or any animal. And the Rambam explains, Hu al derech ha'ashlam alonu. It's for us. There are many mitzvahs with the relationships of man and animals. Don't shecht, Oisei ves bnei, a mother and child on the same day. Shiluach haken, sending away the mother bird. There are a number of mitzvahs about the relationship between man and animals. And the question is it for the sake of the animals or is it for our sake? And there's lots of discussion between the Rishonim. The Ramban, for example, debates by Shiluach haken. The Rambam believes that it's for the sake of the bird, the mother bird. The Ramban says no, it's only to engender within us a midah of compassion. It's for us. Well, the Rambam says a similar thing to what the Ramban says by Shiluach haken. The Rambam says a similar thing over here. Al derech hashlom alonu. The idea of not harassing an animal is not for the animal per se, it's for us. Shaloi nilmed midas achzarius, we should not become cruel. V'loi nachiv levatol, we should not inflict pain for no reason. L'loi toyelos, unless there's a benefit. So the Rambam says if there's a benefit, it's going to be okay. What? We're going to see that killing is different. Killing is different. Slaughter is not inflicting pain. We'll see in the Noach B'Yehuda about that. Avol says that I'm nochen ela nikoin ela chemla v'rachmanis. We should be dispositioned towards mercy and compassion. Vafilu be'eze ba'ale Chaim sheyizdamen. Even if it's some random animal you come across, ela le'esat tzarch, unless it's necessary, only then do you partake. Like it says, ki sa'ava nafshcha lechol bos. If you have a taiva to eat flesh, you shecht. Even stam shechting, is stam going to kill an animal for no reason? The question is that called le'esat tzarich? Someone has a taiva to eat flesh, is a tzarich? He has a taiva. He has a taiva. But the Rambam says, loishe nishchet al derech achzorius oyas choik. Stam to shecht, due to cruelty or it's fun, it would be a problem. I mentioned the Noach B'Yehuda says killing is different than inflicting pain, but obviously even killing, if there's no reason at all, it's mamash a goyish zach. A yid doesn't do such a thing. So the going hunting with mamash, the Rambam, when he says you can't shecht if it's to satisfy some cruel, evil, sadistic nature that somebody has, or haschoik, even if someone wants to shecht for fun. Hunting, if you're not going to use the animal for any purpose, the Rambam says it would be a problem. Okay, but the Rambam says the source for Tza'ar Balak Chaim is this week's Parsha. So we see from the Rambam a few things. A, he holds it's biblical. B, he holds it's from the Malach's rebuke to Bilam. He also says the purpose is for us, not for the animal per se. But he does give a loophole if it's for a purpose, a toyeles, or if it's necessary. For example, you desire to eat meat. So that kind of opens up the window for, any small purpose would be considered a necessity, perhaps.
Wasn't he whipping him to bring him off the wall? But it should go straight.
You're right. He had a reason. Yeah. Taka. You're right. Good point. And the Rambam finishes off by saying that shechting for fun would not be legitimate. Shechting to eat meat because you have a taiva, that's a legitimate reason to shecht. To go hunting and kill for fun is not a reason. The child, what's really the difference? You have to eat meat, you don't have to eat meat. Elamai hasta taiva, you have a desire. I have a desire to hunt. But the Rambam clearly distinguishes. If it's choik, if it's just for sport, that doesn't justify. If you have a taiva to eat meat, that does justify. We'll have to see more about this. Come to number 2. The Sefer Chasidim. What? Learning shchita is not for fun. It's it's for a purpose. It's to enable people to eat meat, kosher meat, particularly. If people are going to be eating treifa meat, then learning shchita is to help people keep a mitzvah. That's even if Tza'ar Balak Chaim is biblical, but eating the kosher is also a mitzvah. So to help Tzorchei Rabbim, we're going to see if it helps Tzorchei Rabbim, the public. That would be different as well. What? So number 2, the Sefer Chasidim. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, one of the greatest of all the Rishonim. He lives in Germany from 1150 roughly to 1217. And he's the greatest, perhaps the greatest from the Chasidei Ashkenaz, from the pious people of Germany. And we discussed him. We had a shir not too long ago on a Thursday night about the history of Kabbalah we discussed this interesting group of the Chasidei Ashkenaz. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid wasn't the first of them. His father, Rabbi Shmuel HaChassid, preceded him. But Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid got to be the most famous. And he has the Sefer Chasidim. And he writes over here in letter Tofrei Samach Vav, Kol Ma'aser Gromis, any actions, Sha'adam Gerim Tza'ar L'Chaveira, you cause your friend pain, Nenesh, the Eibishter will hold you accountable. You'll receive retribution. Va'afim Yaset Tza'ar Al Chinam LeBehema. So too, if you cause unwarranted pain to an animal, Al Chinam, so that also opens the door. If there's any purpose or reason, it would be different. Kagoyim, what's an example? You place upon the animal a greater load than it's able to carry. And it can't go. So you beat it, so it should move. Now, is that called al-chinam? You're not stop hitting an animal for sadistic pleasure. You need to get X amount of merchandise from point A to point B. Nebuch, you only have one animal, so you got to give the animal a bit of klep. Yet Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid says, Asid litin asadin. The Eibush is going to hold you accountable. That's considered chinam. And then he says, Tza'ar Balak Chaim Deraisa. So he says as well, causing pain to an animal is biblical. And he says, Ksiv binyan bilam, this week's parsha. Al mahi kisa sasaincha. The Malach tells Bilam, why did you hit the donkey? Ukeneged she'amar lo lu yesh cherev biyadi ki ato ragtich. Since Bilam said to his donkey, if I would have a sword, I would have killed you. Lochen nerig b'cherev. That's why Bilam was killed by the sword. Last year we had a shir all about why Bilam died by the sword. Many esoteric ideas. Why Bilam was killed by the sword. We didn't see this. Rabbi Wright, the Zohar says there was no way for him to die. Anything Pinchas tried, the guy just survived. But there was a special sword Pinchas was able to use. But says Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, you know why Bilam was killed by the sword? It's because of the harassment he gave to his animal. He told the donkey, if I would have had a sword, I would have killed you. That's why Bilam's killed by the sword. Says Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, Va'ana huzer. But where was Bilam warned? That he can't harass an animal. It's one of the 7 mitzvahs of bnei noach, not that we know of. Evim and achai take. One of the 7 mitzvahs of the goyim is evim and achai, not to have a limb from a living animal. But that's even if the limb falls off on its own. There doesn't have to be Tza'ar Balak Chaim directly associated. Okay, the Sefer HaChinuch, when he speaks about evim and achai, he says, it's connected to the idea of causing the animal's pain. So maybe the best bet from the 7 mitzvahs would be Evim and Achai, but says Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is something else. There's a special word Hashem told Adam. Adam was told by Hashem, Rudu, you should rule over the animals. Adam was not allowed to eat them. That's why Adam was only given 6 mitzvahs. Adam was not given the mitzvah of Evim and Achai because he was not able to eat meat at all. But Adam, on the flip side, was given the instruction to do. He can rule over the animals. The animals belonged to him. He could do with them as he pleased. But when Noach came out of the Teva, everything changed. Man was allowed to eat meat and kill animals for meat, but no longer does the Redu apply. No longer can you do with the animals as you want. You can kill them to eat them, but you can't harass them. He says, La Adam shaloi hutoloi basar taiva. Adam wasn't allowed to shecht animals for meat, but nitna loy rediyah, he was given dominion over them. And therefore Adam was allowed to harass them if necessary. Bechlal he could harass them. They were his. Avol bnei noach, but when Noach came out of the Teva, everything flipped. For the better and the worse. Shehitu lehem basar taiva. Now people are allowed to eat meat. Right, until Noach came out of the Teva, everyone was vegetarians. When Noach came out, everything changed. But loy nitno loy rediyah, Noach was not given dominion over the animals. And part of the loss of the dominion is you can't harass the animals for no reason. That's the biblical source for Evim and Achai, how it applies to Goyim. You see it clearly in the Chumash in this week's parsha by the Malach and by Bilam, but it's already hinted to in the fact that Noach wasn't given the instruction or the power of Rudu, of having dominion over the animals. It's interesting, there's a well-known Ramban. The Ramban says, why Taka, when Noach came out of the teva, were they allowed to eat meat? So the Ramban says, because the animals should have all perished. They only survived the Mabul because he had Noach and his family, a couple Tzadikim. In addition, on the teva, Noach takes care of the animals. So therefore, the animals owe their entire existence to Noach. Says Ramban, that's why Noach has the ability to eat them. He was allowed to eat them, consume them, for his own purpose, because he had complete ownership over them. They only exist because of him.
But you know, as a
So I don't know how that Ramban would fit this Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. It's that bad, huh?
as a result, humans live much shorter lives. Before Noach, everybody lived forever.
He's saying it's because we eat meat.
Exactly.
Because we eat meat. Well, I'll tell you that there's a debate. Some Rishonim believe that even Adam was allowed to eat meat if it died on its own. Some Rishonim hold that they couldn't kill animals, but they could eat meat on their own. So it could be they did eat meat according to those Rishonim, and they still lived a long time. Now, so how you would put the Ramban with Yehuda HaChassid, weiß ich nicht. It sounds like from Yehuda HaChassid, Noach was given the right to eat the animals, but he lost all other dominion. Fine. Either way, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid says, just like the Rambam, that Tza'ar Balak is from this week's parsha. It's biblical, and what's interesting is, according to Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, it applies to Goyim too. According to Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, it applies by Goyim too. We see that from the fact, he says clearly that the Malach chastises Bilam. Bilam was killed because he harassed his animal. And then he says, where was Bilam warned? He says, all Goyim were warned. Noach was warned. When the Eibusha told Noach to eat meat, and the Eibusha removed, casually removed the authority of Rudu, that's where all Goyim have been warned on Avim and Achai. So that means, are there 8 mitzvahs of bnei noach? Well, maybe we'll still count it amongst Avim and Achai. But this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. There happens to be an interesting discussion. Most Achronim believe Goyim are not instructed on Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim. The Eish Avram, the Butchacher, he writes clearly in Hilchas Shabbos that Goyim have no prohibition of Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim. It's not one of the 7 mitzvahs. Avim and Achai has nothing to do with it. Avim and Achai is even if the limb fell off on its own, it's nothing to do with the pain of the animal. And he believes that Goyim and the Pri Megadim as well, Paskins, as many Achronim hold, Goyim have no prohibition of Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim. And yet you have this Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, who says clearly that's why Bilam was killed, at least by the sword. The reason why Bilam got his just desserts by the sword is because of the awful statement about the sword that he told his donkey. If I had a sword, I would have killed you. And then the Yehuda HaChassid said clearly all Goyim are warned on this. So apparently, if you learn Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim from the story of Bilam and the donkey, it would apply to Goyim too, like the Rambam and like the Sefer Chassidim. But we're going to see there's many other sources to Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim, according to which there's reason to say it only applies by yidden. And that would be the reason why the Pri Megadim and the Butchacher believe that way. What are some of the other sources?
So are we allowed to do shchita? Shchita is not tava to eat meat. Are we allowed to do kaparas?
Kaparas, the flesh gets eaten.
Huh?
The flesh gets eaten.
Yeah.
The flesh gets eaten.
You don't do the kaparas in flesh.
Oh, you're talking about how do you do the thing?
The Tza'ar,
That it's
No,
Tza'ar?
Tza'ar
Depends how you hold it. You taka when you hold it. You don't crush its. Hold it very delicately. I'll tell you a story. There's a Gemara in Baba Metzia, Daf Pehei. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi suffered for many years physical ailments, and the Gemara says his suffering came to him through. There's a couple more papers over here. Actually, I only have one more. I'll make a paper airplane and chuck it and whatever. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's sufferings came upon him through a story, and they left through a story. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, one day he's in the Shlachtois, and there's a little kelbel, a calf, which was about to be shechted, came running to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and tried to hide in his kapota. and it was crying. The calf knew what was going to happen, and was trying to, Pashat asking Rabbi Yehuda Nasi for mercy. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, this is what you're created for. Lekachna tzarta. This is what you're created for. So the Gemara says in heaven, they said, you don't have compassion on the calf, you're going to suffer. And for years, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi suffered horribly. Until one day, his cleaning lady was cleaning in the house, and there was a chulda, a weasel, that had some little babies on the floor, and the cleaning lady was going to, shovel them up and chuck them. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, leave him. It says, V'rachamav al kol masav. Hashem's compassion is on everything He made. Leave them. In heaven, they said, you have compassion on the little weasels, we'll have compassion on you. And his suffering left him. So there's a... You're not talking when the Rebbe would hold the chicken, hold it delicately.
No, but I'm not...
The shchita?
You just said that if you do shchita for hunting...
Yes, but the flesh gets eaten.
But it's not for you.
Someone's eating the flesh. Someone's eating the flesh. And the truth is, even if the flesh doesn't get eaten, there's a big purpose. It's a purpose. When you do kaparas, it's to cleanse us from our averis, or it's in order to shake us up. That to imagine what happened to the shechita should happen to us. Right? The Ramban says the whole idea of the carbon in the Beis HaMikdash was when you envision, you see your carbon going up in flames, and you realize it should have been me, it makes a person do tshuva. There's nothing greater than that. That's greater than eating the if you're allowed to shecht an animal to eat the meat, you can definitely shecht an animal to become closer to Hashem. So the answer is it's considered a tzarech. It's a necessity.
As long as it against the kapar because it wasn't eaten.
Right, yeah, Baltashkas, right. So together with Tza'ar Balak, often in the discussions, Baltashkas comes up as well. Okay, Al Kopanim, what are some of the other sources of Tza'ar Balak? So we come to the Charedim. In number 3, the Sefer Charedim. The Charedim, Rebbe Lozer Eskari, was in Tzfas in the times of the Arizal. You're going back almost 500 years. And he wrote a beautiful Sefer going through the mitzvahs. And let's read number 3. Here he also brings a story of the Arizal for your consumption. He says in Perek Vav de Brachas, number 3, he says in the 40th page of Brachas, in the 6th Perek, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Asur lo adam sheyitem klum. It's asur for a person to taste anything before you give to your animal. As it says, V'nasati esav b'sadachum techel, there's grass in your field for your animals. And then it says, V'chalta v'savata, right? First your animals, and then you. What's the reason for that statement in the Gemara, right? Rav gives the din. You got to feed your animals before you feed yourself, right? That's why some people, when they cut the challah at the table, first they give the challah to their family, and then they eat. Okay, that's just a joke. But what's the reason? What's the reason behind this din of Rav? So says the Charedim, David Tza'ar Balak. The reason is because it's Tza'ar Balak. If you eat first and then you give to your animal, when the animal sees you eating, the animal doesn't know that there's food coming its way in 10 seconds. Imagine the pain the animal has. Unnecessary pain.
Same thing for kids.
What if he doesn't see it? What if it's in the stable?
So, you would still apply. Any moment that you're delaying the food is considered Tza'ar Balak, but in its truest form would be if the animal sees it and the mamash suffers. If it doesn't see it, there's still an element, the more you delay it, you're causing hunger to the animal. For sure to actively, right? If you're going to eat first and then feed your animal, you're only passively causing hunger to the animal. But to actively hurt an animal, we say many places, Tza'ar Balak Deraisa, the Poskim quoted. So the Charedim also says clearly Tza'ar Balak is biblical, and it could be he's learning it from the pasuk of Nasati Esav B'Sadav M'chad V'Zavata. We'll see. He's going to bring another source in a moment. The story in our days. Harav Hamakubal Hagel, the great Kabbalist, Rabbi Yitzchak Ashkenazi Zal. That's the Arizal. Rabbi Yitzchak Ashkenazi. The Arizal's father was Ashkenazi. His mother was Sephardi. mother had a last name of Francis. When Arizal was young, he was born in Eretz Yisrael. When he was young, his father passed, and his mother, Rebbetzin Ashkenazi, had a brother by the name of Mordechai Francis, who was a tax collector, a very wealthy Jew in Egypt. And Arizal and his mother, they went to live by his uncle. His uncle had a daughter. Arizal married his cousin, and it was happily ever after. But not for long. Well, in Egypt, it was right till he came to Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yitzchak Ashkenazi, Histakel, the Arizal gazed b'fnei in the face of a certain Talmud Chacham. The Amaloi Arizal said, when I look at your face, Nishim b'fanecha avoin Tza'ar Balak, I can see on your forehead what you sinned. And the sin is Tza'ar Balak Chaim. You know, in the early years of the Rebbe in New York, in the 1950s and 60s, Bochrim would often go into Yechidus to the Rebbe, sometimes a couple times a year. You know, there was a smaller crowd. There was a certain Bocher who for months was avoiding crossing paths with the Rebbe. The Rebbe asked the Anhala what's going on. The Bocher tells the Anhala that, I've stumbled recently big time. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed to go in front of the Rebbe. So the Rebbe told the Anhala, tell the Bocher that every time I come from Mincha and I see him across the room, when I see his forehead, I see everything that is done already. So all the secrets are out. Tell him he should come by.
Too late.
So, you have the story here with the Arizal. The Arizal looked at a certain Talmud Chacham, and he said, I see a sin on your forehead, somewhere on the face, l'chorei the forehead, and Tza'ar Balak Chaim is the sin. Now this Talmud Chacham didn't know what it's about. V'yoyse Talmud Chacham, he doesn't say who it is, so I don't know if we should say who it is. But there's a story there was a Reb Moshe Galanti, who was one of the few that actually got the early smicha. He had a story similar with the Arizal about this. It could be it was him, but either way, mitzvah mafashvish bedover. This Talmud Chacham was very pained. What's the Arizal talking about here? This guy, what's Tza'ar Balak Chaim? He was searching everywhere. Ad shemasa till he found the issue. His wife wouldn't feed the chickens in the morning. She would allow the chickens to roam in the courtyard or and in the street to go find their own food, to pick in the garbage. He realized his wife wasn't giving breakfast every morning to the chickens. So he instructed his wife to give them bran and water, give them a breakfast that chickens deserve every morning. After this was rectified, the Arizal didn't know about this guy's discussions with his wife, but one day the Arizal looks at his face and Arizal says, the sin has disappeared. The sin has disappeared. So Amaloi, so the Arizal said, what happened? So then the guy told him the whole story. There's actually a Maisa, in the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, there was a married woman, who unfortunately had illicit relations. And it was discovered, but there was shilas, were there Eidim, was a real testimony, does the husband have to believe it, etc., etc., all types of serious questions. And the question was sent to many Rabbonim, and the Tzemach Tzedek got the question as well. The Tzemach Tzedek said that the woman's prohibited to her husband. So there was another, I think it was actually one of the Tzemach Tzedek's, someone in his family, one of the big Rabbonim, Chernobyl. No, that's it. But in another place it says, I saw different girsas. I saw the Aaron Chernobyl girsa, but I saw another girsa of someone. But either way, fine. He told the Tzemach Tzedek, what do you mean? I look at the woman, I see no sin. There's no sin. I don't detect any sin. The Tzemach Tzedek said, because she washed her face with tears. She did so much tshuva, her tears washed away the Avera. That's why you won't see it. But it doesn't change the past. If she committed adultery, she's prohibited to her husband. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek said. Akaponim, back to the Charedim over here. Venira shezeh anof mimitzvus v'alachta b'drachav. Says the Charedim, where's the source? Now he veers off from V'nasati Esav B'sadach Olevim Techa, which he started with. He says the source is V'halachta b'dracha, the Yid has to follow the path of God. Upirshon, the Chazal say, if God is compassionate, you be compassionate. And it says about Hashem, V'racham aval kol ma'asav. Who does the Eibush have compassion on? Everything He made. And if we have to exemplify the Eibishter, V'halachta b'dracha, to walk in the paths of God and be compassionate like Him, then we have to follow His example. If God is compassionate on everything He made, animals included, us too. And like the story we saw in Bab Metzia with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, when he told his cleaning lady, don't touch the little weasels over there. The Eibish's compassion is on everything that He made. So the Charedim also said it's biblical. He gives the thing of Alachto B'drachav, but he also connects it to V'nasati Esav B'sadach Olevim Techa. First your animals eat, and then you eat. In fact, Rabbi Yankov Emden was asked, that din of Rav, that you have to feed your behemoth before you, is that only a behemoth? Cow, a goat, a domesticated animal. What if you have a pet? You have a cat, you have a dog. Any pet you have, do you have to feed them before you? So Rabbi Yankov Emden said, yeah. He said, because what's the reason? Why do you have to feed your animal for a zil buster time? What's the reason? Because Tza'ar Balak. He learns just like the Charedim. The reason for that din is Tza'ar Balak, and that applies equally to domesticated animals and also cats and dogs to chayes, to non-domesticated animals as well. So this is another source to the idea. According to this, it makes sense. It only applies to a Jew. The Pri Megadim, the Eshel Avram, who say the din of Tza'ar Balak only applies to Jews. Well, it makes sense because the source, whether it's from feed your animals and then yourself, or whether it's from following the paths of God, halachta b'drachav, these are mitzvahs given to yidden, not to goyim. Join me in number 4. We have a tshuva of the Radvaz, the David ben Zimra, who was a great Rav in Egypt for many, many years. And ultimately he moved to Tzfas at the end of his life. According to some, he lived for 110 years, a very long life. He was a chief rabbi in Egypt for at least 40 of them. Okay, tshuva, says the Radvaz. Number 4, Hashayla ha'achas asher sha'alta. This fellow was asking the Radvaz a number of shaylas. One of them was that if you see somebody's animal struggling under a load, so we said there's a mitzvah to unload prika, to reload the animal. But if a groiser Rav is walking down, a groiser Rosh Yeshiva, someone who's a very a mechubadik mensch is walking down the road, with the lange weiße board. Imagine how it's going to look when they're going to roll up their sleeves and start helping the stranger put the suitcases back on top of the animal. The Gemara says clearly, if it's zaken ve'ein lefi kveid, if somebody's an older person, it's not becoming, it's unbecoming, it's not honorable for them to get their hands dirty. They don't have to. So the shaila this person asked the Radvaz is, if Tza'ar Balak is biblical, then how could you not help somebody's animal? You have to help them reload the packages, unload the packages. How does your honor come into the ballpark? How does it come into the discussion? There's a biblical prohibition over here, right? When you're dealing with the Eibishter's honor, all human honor gets thrown out the window. So what's going on? So says the Radvaz, listen, Tiris Ramban Zal, the Ramban already dealt with it a long time ago. The Ramban says the following. Asay de covered Torah Adif. The Ramban says you have a big Rosh Yeshiva with the Lange Weiße Board, the Groiser Rav. Well, he has to help the animal. What? For the sake of the animal? His honor is greater than the animal's honor. What? So the animal is uncomfortable, and therefore the Rav should be uncomfortable? The mitzvahs asay of honoring the Torah is also biblical, and that outweighs the biblical issue of Tza'ar Balak. That's what the Ramban says. Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, you have to fear Talmud Chacham. The Kasav Allah Haranzal. The Ran writes, this is a well-known comment, the Ran had an issue with this Ramban. So the Ramban is a couple generations after the Ramban, And he says, Deloy Mechurvi, he doesn't like what the Ramban says. The Zoken lav davka shekana chachma. Sometimes the word Zoken stands for Zeh kana chachma, someone who acquired wisdom. But when it comes to unloading and loading animals, Zoken doesn't mean that. Zeh shekana chachma, someone who acquired wisdom. Ella, okay, the hey pei hey is probably a printing mistake. But over here it means l'mechubed. Anyone that's honored doesn't have to be someone who's a Torah scholar. Anybody. Like the Ran says, as it says, Kol she b'shaloi perek v'toin. If you would do it on your own animal, b'shal chaver, and then you do it to your friend's animal as well. Avol kol she'ein darke b'shaloi. If it would be unbecoming to do it on your own animal, you'd get someone else to do it for you. Ein echai b'shal chavera. You don't do for your friend. So it doesn't have to be specifically if someone's a great Talmudic scholar. It's anyone who has any honor, self-worth to the point that they wouldn't degrade their honor by doing it themselves on their own animal. They don't have to do it themselves for their friend's animal. So therefore the Ran says he disagrees with the Ramban. Elokach nearly says the Ran, I'll tell you the pshat. Why would it be that anyone's personal honor can override the issue of Tza'ar Balak Chaim? So the Ran says the following: the kivan the Tza'ar Balak Chaim hutul tashmishin shel bnei adam. Since the issue of Tza'ar Balak Chaim is a non-issue when it comes to human purposes. If you have if the person has something to do with the animal, Tza'ar Balak Chaim is a non-issue. If there's some purpose, there's some gain to the human, then Tza'ar Balak Chaim is no longer an issue. So kol shekain bekovid, so for sure a person's dignity. If you're allowed to harass an animal when you're going to gain from it, so for sure you could passively let the animal suffer under its load just to save your own dignity, to save your own face. For sure, b'shev al tasa, passively to let, not to passively allow the animal to remain in discomfort, because kodel kovid abrius, we know that human honor does play a role in halacha, especially if you're going to violate something passively. Now, says the Radvaz, you know what I say about this debate? I say that the Ramban never meant what the Ran thinks he meant. Shaloi hoisa kavonas harav, so the Ramban never meant b'masha omar asek kovet Torah adif, that it's about kovet Torah dafka bezokan shekana chachma. The Ramban never meant specifically if someone's a big Talmud chacham. Afilu zokin mechubed, anyone who's a distinguished elder. And the reason, taka like the Ran of Godel Kovad Abrius Shedoicha Lois Asa Shebetayra. The Gemara says in Brachas that Kovad Abrius can push away a biblical issue. The general rule is Kovad Abrius can push away a biblical issue passively, or even a rabbinic issue actively. There's obviously exceptions. But Kol Shekain Shidochet Tza'ar Balak Chaim Afilu Shuman Ater, and here's the clincher: for sure that human dignity would push away Tza'ar Balak Chaim, even though it's biblical. Shari Ein Boy La V'Lo Yaseh, because Tza'ar Balak Chaim has no lo yaseh, has no essay, but it's biblical. Very interesting Radvaz. He says Tza'ar Balak Chaim, there's no mitzvah's essay behind it. You won't find any mitzvah's essay that says you have to make sure the animals are out of pain. There's no lo yaseh which says you can't inflict pain on an animal. But nonetheless, it's biblical. So you ask, according to Radvaz, why is it biblical? If there's no lo yaseh, there's no assay that tells you about Tza'ar Balak Chaim, so how is it biblical? Okay, so the sources we saw before, whether you learn from the story of Bilam, according to the Charedim, you learn from Mahu Rachum, Afat Rachum, it's not clearly a mitzvah saseh. It's from a general idea of following, emulating the ways of God. But it's an interesting Radvaz. It's biblical for sure, even though there's no lav and no aseh. Anyhow, so what do we see from the Radvaz? First of all, he just defends the Ramban. He says the Ramban and Ran are really saying the same thing. But the clincher is his last line. He's sure it's biblical, although he said it's not an aseh, it's not a lo yaseh. He doesn't tell us where it's from. He wants to leave us guessing. So what do we have so far? Either we learn from Bilam, or we have the Charedim, you learn from feeding your animal before yourself, or emulating the ways of God. The Ritva says it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. God whispered into Moshe's ears when he stood in Har Sinai, Just like there's many dinim Hashem told Moshe which have no hint in the written law in Torah B'Ksav, it's just the Masorah, the tradition. So too Tza'ar Balak Chaim. That's what the Ritva says, which is interesting, because the Rambam Bechlal holds that anything which is halacha l'Moshe Sinai doesn't carry a punishment. The Rambam writes in his commentary on Mishnayos that anything which is only halacha Moshe Sinai carries no punishment. So according to the Ritva, if Tza'ar Balak Chaim is halacha Moshe Sinai, you can't say Bilam was killed by the sword because of what he said to the donkey. They shouldn't have carried a punishment if you stick the Ritva with the Rambam and his Pirush HaMishnayos. But there's a couple more sources. What? You're asking something else. If it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, how would it apply by goyim? That's what you're asking. Sorry? No, how which of the Sheva mitzvahs? Which of the Sheva mitzvahs? In which one? In which one? Only in which one? Anyhow. Which one? Avim and Achai. We say it's not so posh to put into Avim and Achai. Why would? Well, that's what Rabbi Yehuda Chassid said in number 2. It's an addition. You should know, according to many Rishonim, there's many more than the 7 mitzvahs bnei noach. There's many more. What? Yeah, the Ramban counts many more than 7. You know? Yeah, according to many, there's Kishuf, Sirus, and different. Anyhow, so this might be an addition. Okay, let's leave that at that. The Meiri and the Raavad, 2 of the great Rishonim, both from the area of Provence, a couple generations apart, they taina the source of Tza'ar Balak Chaim is from Loisachsam Shor B'Dishay. In Parshas Kisei, the Torah says you cannot muzzle an ox while it's threshing. When the ox is working for you, you can't muzzle it. You have to allow it to roam and eat. Imagine how painful it will be for the ox to work with the grain, to work with food, and not be able to eat. Now, by the way, the Gemara in Bava Metzia extrapolates from here to people. You were laughing about the joke of feeding your family challah before yourself, learning from the din of the animal. But this din of loisachsam shor b'dishay, not muzzling an ox while it works, is actually the source. When you have workers that are working with food items, you have to allow them to eat as well. You know, if you have kids making some chestera bags for you, you know, for every 10 bags they make, they have to eat one. You know, loisachsam shor b'dishay. What happens in the Catskills?
They don't let you eat it that day. They give it to you the next day.
Okay, so except in the Catskills, but everywhere else, and there's the whole pedican in Bava Metzia about all the dinim of allowing the workers to eat, and we learn it from Loisachsam. Well, one of the there's also talking about the workers, but we compare it to Loisachsam Shor B'Dishay. So the Meiri and the Raavad say this is the source of Tza'ar Balak Chaim. Why did God say you can't muzzle the ox? Imagine how much pain. So that's the Meiri and the Raavad. The Sefer HaChinuch himself learns it from a pasuk Loi Sachrish. You can't plow with an ox and a donkey together. Why not? Right? You can't have different kosher, treif animal, or different minim, different species working together. There's a well-known story with Rabbeinu Tam and his brother, the Rashbam. The Rashbam was a very pious man. When he would only look down when he walked, and he was once about to enter a wagon, not noticing that the wagon was pulled by animals of different species. Rabbeinu Tam calls out to his brother, "Al tiyeh tzadik harbe," a pasuk from Shlomo Melech. Don't be overly pious, because you're not even looking where you're going. You're about to enter the wagon, and you're going to be pulled. You're going to be pulled by.
The Nessie came there.
An accident.
Right. So that Rabbeinu Tam was there. Right. So some said that what?
It said that with the Nessie.
Yeah. Yes. So Rashbam said faked, but apparently what I'm doing is correct. If the Eibishter spared me and saved me. There's another. The Bach, I'll just throw in this story. It's when the Bach passed away, the angels took his soul straight to Gan Eden. The Bach said, "What do you mean? Everyone has to go through Gehenna. Even big Tzadikim pass through Gehenna. Why should I be different?" So they said, what do you mean? Your soul is so pure. He says, no, I don't want to hear about it. Everyone goes through Gehenna, I'm going too. They said, you have no sin. He said, find an Avera that I did. This is a story recorded in Old Sfarim. And they took out the files and they found something. It once happened as he was leaving Shul, he had something on him that was mirror-like. The sun was shining, and there was a wagon not too far from him that the wagon was harnessed to two different animals, different species, and the item that he had somehow reflected the sun into the eyes of these animals, and they gave a jerk. And therefore he somehow had an involvement in two animals of different species moving together. And that, he was warned, okay, you have your pass. He was given his ticket, his pass to go to Gehenna. But they weren't going to take him in, they only took him bypass. But as he got close, he ran in and he grabbed as many souls as he could, and he took him out of Gehenna, took him to Gan Eden. That's why he wanted to go. He wanted to rescue many neshamas. So Al Kaponim, the issue of having a shur, an ox, and a donkey together, so the Sefer HaChinuch says it's very hard for an animal to work with another animal from a different species. It's not from its own family. It's uncomfortable. It's hard. And he says the reason why God forbade it is because of Tza'ar Balak. The Baal HaTurim says, why can't you have the chamor and a shur together? Because the ox chews its cud, right? So you're going to have both animals are going to eat, right? And then what's going to happen a couple minutes later? The donkey's finished and the shur is still regurgitating and chewing. And the donkey's going to feel like, what's going on? Why is he having a second course? And I'm not getting a second course. That's why it's painful. It's painful. Anyhow.
So don't bury people together. It continues.
What?
You don't bury enemies together. It continues.
So that's another source. So the source, according to the Sefer HaChinuch, is from not having different animals working together. So Akaponim, we see there's quite a number of sources to the idea of Tza'ar Balak. But this takes us to the next couple minutes. Fine, Tza'ar Balak is biblically prohibited, right? We said in Gemara, Rabbi Yosef clearly said it's rabbinic, but you see from all the sources here and all the sources we quoted, it's unanimous that it's a biblical issue. What's the source? We've already seen many sources. It could be, it's Halach L'Moshe Sinai, the story of Bilam, emulating Hashem, Loisachsam Shur B'dishoy, not plowing with different animals together, etc. On the other hand, we saw the Rambam says clearly that if there's some benefit for man, then it's okay. So join me number 5 for a second. Number 5 is a Gemara Masechta Shabbos. It says over there, if an animal falls into a pit, then you're allowed to bring kodim v'ksasas, you're allowed to bring pillows and blankets, place it under the animal on Shabbos. Frek to Gemara number 5, if you put these pillows and blankets in the pit under the animal, and the animal's going to try and climb on them to exit the pit, you are dismantling a kli from its use, which is rabbinically prohibited. Now, why are you dismantling it from its use? So Rashi holds that the kli is going to become muktzah, because once the animal stands upon this kli, you can't move the kli, because the animal is muktzah, right? Moving an animal on Shabbos is muktzah, and therefore the vessel underneath it is considered muktzah as well, as long as the animal's on top of it, and because this happens only on Shabbos. But you're taking a kli, right now the pillows and blankets are okay to move. And if you put them in the pit and the animal will stand upon them, those pillows and blankets now become prohibited. And midrabanan, you can't do that. Why? It's like you're breaking an item, so you're destroying something. So the Gemara says, Savar, this opinion holds mevatel kli mechonoi, dismantling a kli from its use is only a rabbinic issue. But Tza'ar Balak is Deraisa. But an animal's pain, when an animal's stuck at the bottom of the pit, the animal's screaming, it's mamash, it's biblical. Va'asi Deraisa, the biblical issue will come, will push away the Derabanan. It's a clear Gemara that At least that opinion holds Tza'ar Balak Chaim is biblical. Look at Rashi on the side, on number 5 on the left-hand side, the second Rashi. Rashi says, what's the source of Tza'ar Balak Chaim biblical? It's from Ozev Tazev Imai. It's from the mitzvahs of helping an animal which is struggling under the load to unload it or to reload it. We learn it from there. And Rashi says, Ve'ika man dedorsh, there are somebody who says, Taima dekra, the reason for the pasuk, the reason the Eibishter instructs us to help the animal, to unload the package that it's suffering from, because Tza'ar Balak Chaim. The truth is, in Bab Metzia, it doesn't say anywhere this idea very clearly, that we learn Tza'ar Balak Chaim from the mitzvah of unloading the animal, but that's what Rashi says. So Rashi also had his own opinion. Rashi says, yeah, the mitzvah of helping an animal to unload is the source for Tza'ar Balak Chaim. So that's another reason we can add to the tally, if anyone's counting for how many reasons we have. Al Capone, we come now to number 6. Number 6 is a very important psak of the Ramah. It's an Even Ezer Siman Hey. Kol dover hatzarech l'refuah. Anything which is necessary for human health or other things. Leis bei mishum isur tza'ar balei chaim. If human health is in the picture, tza'ar balei chaim is a non-issue. And he quotes us from the Isser Veheter Ha'aruch Fein. V'lachin therefore mutter lamroid noitzes. You're allowed to pluck off feathers, me'ivzes from different chayas, from geese. You're allowed to pluck off. You need a feather to write with. You're right. You don't have any pens in your office, so you see you pluck off from the goose. V'leko lamechash. There's no problem of tza'ar balei chaim. And where's it getting that from? Maharai. That's Rabbi Yisrael Isserlan, the Trumas Hadeshin. The Ramah Paskins. If human health is in the discussion, or there's any need, you just need a feather, you can pluck it off. Nonetheless, people don't do it because it's cruelty. So it's interesting. Tza'ar Balak Chaim, in essence, like we saw in number 1 in the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, is all about cruelty. But here that Amos is saying there are certain cases where it's okay. Really, minadin, it's okay because there's human need, there's human gain involved. But yet, the Rambam says still don't do it because it's still cruel. So apparently the human gain is enough to remove the issue of Tza'ar Balak Chaim, which was based on cruelty. But still, in order not to be an achshar, don't do it. But this is the source, this is the psak, this is the source of halacha, that when it comes to human need, what needs to be done to the animal should be done. About 300 years ago or so, the great Rabbi Yaakov Reisha, the Shavus Yankiv, was asked by a certain doctor. This doctor wanted to test some new medicines on animals. He didn't want to test them on humans, didn't know what the result was going to be. There's always unforeseen what's the word? Side effects. He says he's going to test it on animals. And the shaila is, can you? The animal could die, the animal could suffer. So the Shavus Yankiv Tain is like this. The first Gemara he quotes, the first Gemara is a Gemara in Chulin. Rabbi Chia, the great Rabbi Chia, had a big, a nice amount of flax, and there were moths that were chewing their way through. So he asked Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he asked his teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi told him, you get a bird, you shech the bird, and you allow the blood to flow in the water where the flax is soaking, and all the moths will leave the flax and be attracted to the blood. So says the Shavus Yankiv, what do you see from here? You're allowed to kill a bird for financial reasons. What did the bird do? You're not going to eat the bird? It's necessary. You got to save your flax. It's necessary. So that's the first raya he gives. So is that really a good raya? So if you look at number 8, in number 8, it's a well-known tshuva of the Noide B'Yehuda. Somebody asked the Noide B'Yehuda about hunting. Going hunting. Is it okay for a Jew to go hunting? So the Noide B'Yehuda says like this: Va'omnam ein lanu laharich b'zarona b'mayich ki kvar herich maharai. That's Rabbi Yisrael Isserlan, the Trumas Hadeshin, says, Shekol davar sheyesh bo tzarich la'adam, anything which has a need for a person, there's no issue of tza'ar balei chaim. V'gam lo shayach tza'ar balei chaim el tzari ol anichoi b'chaim. Says in the Yehuda, Tza'ar Balak is to inflict pain upon the animal and leave it alive. Avalahamis behemoths v'chayis, but to kill an animal and a chaya, leis be mishum Tza'ar Balak Chaim. The Yehuda, he says a very important idea. Tza'ar Balak is only to inflict pain. Murder, death is not Tza'ar Balak. Now, if you look in the Mer Nevuchim in number 1, the Rambam seemed to put it all together. But the Yehuda says no, he cuts it very with a sharp knife. He divides between inflicting pain versus murder. And then he brings a raya from Chulin Dav Zayin Amud Beis. Reb Pinchas ben Yoir was going to enter the house of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. He wouldn't come in. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had some white mules in the stable. And these were considered vicious animals. And Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoir said, I'm not coming into your house as long as you own these animals. So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, I'll sell them. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoir says, how could you sell them? They're dangerous for whoever's going to buy them. I'll make them hefker. That's even worse. Then they'll start roam around and destroy. So says Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Akarna luhu, I will cut off the hooves so they can't prance around. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoir says, what do you mean? There's Tza'ar Balak Chaim. You can't just do that. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, no problem. Katalna luhu, I'll kill him. Says Pinchas ben Yoir, that's Bal Tashchis. What do you see from here, says Anoy Rabbi Yehuda? When Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, I'll cut off the hooves, Pinchas ben Yair says, no, you're causing pain. What did Rabbi Yehuda respond? He said, okay, I'll kill him. You see from there clearly that killing is not considered Tza'ar Balak Chaim, which would mean that the Shvus Yankov's raya from the other story of Chulin, when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi told Rabbi Chia to check the bird and allow the blood to flow in the liquid of where the Rabbi Chia's flax was, that's killing an animal is different than causing pain. You know, trying medicines on animals can cause severe pain. So maybe that raya is not a good raya. But I'll tell you, the Shvus Yankov finishes off his letter, his tshuva. He says he believes it's mutter to test whatever medicines are on the animals because there's human gain. And he quotes the Ramah we saw in number 6. The Ramah says in number 6, if there's refuah involved, it's not a problem. The issue is the Ramah finishes off by saying, but nonetheless, people don't do it because it's cruel. So what about that? So the Shvus Yankov wants to be mechadish and say, that's only if the pain is direct and immediate. If you're plucking a feather off the goose, the pain, you are directly inflicting the pain and it's immediate. But if you give a rat something to eat, right, and the pain might only come in 6 to 12 hours from now, he says it's not direct because maybe it's the animal that's eating the food, so it's not direct from you. It's not immediate either. And then it's okay. He says once it's not direct and not immediate, then even the Ramah's warning that still don't do it out of cruelty no longer applies. No longer applies. So that's the Shvus Yankov's opinion.
Tumor growing in their brain is much more painful and much more abusive than a fucking.
Fine, but it's only a grama. It's not direct and it's not immediate, and that's the Shvus Yankov's opinion. That's what he paskins. I get it. What?
Like being mean.
Right. But he says that the Inyan of Achsaris only applies if it's direct and immediate.
So how did Yehuda HaNasi get to keep wild animals for a period of time before this? That's the real Yehuda HaNasi.
Oh, had the white mules. The white mules.
Why did he have them?
Apparently, they didn't do any damage when he was. So here's the thing. We'll just finish off with this. Reb Moshe Feinstein has a number of tshuvas about Tza'ar Balak Chaim. A big question people asked him is, what about exterminating insects? Yeah. Can you just get rid of something you don't like? The lizard's bothering you. Can you just, step on it and cut it and who knows what? Iguanas. So the Moshe Feinstein tainas that it's permitted to call an exterminator. He says whenever the pests are bothering you, and he said it's not just you. He says there's kids around. It seriously hurts kids, the wife maybe. When a woman sees a mouse, right, she's screaming for the next 10 years, you can still hear the echo in the house.
How about tenting your house against termites?
But he says, don't do it yourself. He says, call an exterminator, or you do yourself, you set up traps, but he says to actively go and destroy it yourself, if you have another option, it's achzarius. It's achzarius. What? No, so if you have another way, then instead of going around and, in other words, if there's an insect over here and you could just put some poison here, or you could go with a blowtorch and kill it. Don't do the blowtorch. It's a pasnish. It's achzarius. It's cruel. It's cruel. But then we have the story of the white veal. The story of the white veal. You probably remember when it was in the 80s that there was a movement to raise calves in a certain way with a certain diet. They would feed them formula, no grain or grass, a very strange diet which wasn't apparently not very pleasant for the animals, and the animals can't move. The more the animal moves, the more red the meat turns.
It becomes tougher.
Yeah, it becomes tougher, right? And they were producing this white veal. There was also an issue, they would take away the kids from the mother right away, nor the mother should retain the milk. Apparently the milk would help that the meat should be whiter or something, I don't know. Or maybe the kids shouldn't have the mother's milk. Ich weiß nicht was exactly. But the question came to Reb Moshe, the white veal. So Reb Moshe writes very clearly, he says, first of all, the white veal was notorious for having many trephus. When they would inspect the lungs, there was a whopping percentage of these animals that had holes in their lungs. He says the Gemara says, or some type of trephus, some issue with the lung that you wouldn't need it. The Gemara says clearly that the majority of animals are not trephus. And yet these white veal animals, he says the majority were trephus. And he says, every sheikhet I asked, he says the Fruma one said like 80% were. He says even the more modern sheikhtim still said more than half were treif. So he said that it could be in these animals. Not only you have to check the lungs, you got to check other parts of the body too. Who knows where? Because the animals are so delicate and so weak. Who knows where there could be holes and other incisions, and it could be anywhere. And then it comes to the issue of Tza'ar Balak. And he says, Tza'ar Balak is mutter when there's human need, when there's a toyelis, the Rambam says, or the Ramah says, refuah, or shar dvar, but there has to be something which is objectively considered a need. And he says, why is white veal a need? What's wrong with red veal? Why is white veal? Is it tastier? He says, b'chal, not tastier. Is it better for you? He said, it was a hype. He writes, it was a hype. It was just a thing. It was a mishagas. It was a mishagas. Like there was a big doctor once said that, that everyone likes to have spelt bread, but if all bakeries sold spelt, people would all be looking for the wheat. It's all a hype. It's all a hype. Apparently, in Rav Moshe's opinion, he says, therefore, it's not a need. It's just a mishugas. No, he tinies. No, it doesn't even. So the shaila is though that a number of years later, the shilas came up again, and there were people that said, no, it tastes a little bit different. It's a little different. The question is, fine, granted it's a little bit different. Maybe it has other, other milas, other chesrenis. The question is, what's considered a real need for a person to enable to harass an animal? And Rav Moshe was very much against it. But it's coming back. A number of years ago, they wanted to bring it back because apparently they were able to feed the animals. What? Is it white? No. No. No, right. Read Bachal, but no. It was a much more white. It was a much wider color. Yeah.
It was really good.
There's another issue another halachic issue is that the formula they were feeding was full of treifa animal fats. There are more paskins in your day. If you have an animal that grows exclusively on treifa food, you're not supposed to eat it. And the question is the formula. What? So that's what does exclusive mean? The formula that was being fed to these calves was every ounce of it was full of treifa fat. Now, there are other ingredients as well, But everything it had treifa fat. What?
Cow disease spread because they were
Chopping
feeding it
up
meat.
Yes, right. So there you go. So that was another big halachic issue. Anyhow, so it came up again.
Salmon eats non-kosher.
Right, but not exclusive.
Makes it red.
Okay, but it's not. Also, here you're officially feeding. It's being fed, not in the sense being fed exclusively, not complete treif, but a mixture of treif. So it goes into a shaila of zeh v'zeh goyim when you have, it's growing from the treif, but also from something else. How do you look at it? So this halacha shaila is coming on the desks of many rabbanim. Because apparently today everything's different today, right? Today the animals, they like the formula they begin, and they're allowed to move around a little bit, and they keep the baby by the mother a little longer. So some Litvish Rabbanim are readdressing the issue that maybe the Moshe would agree that in today's conditions it's a little more favorable towards the animals, not such an issue of Eivrim min Achai. of Tza'ar Balak Chaim. Anyhow, this is just a little bit of the discussion.
You think that the